Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Inside the Therapy Room. I'm your host, Sam Sellers. I'm a registered therapist, a wife and a fur mama, and I am passionate about breaking down the barriers and stigma attached to therapy. I want to begin by first honouring the traditional custodians of the land we live and work on. Today, Khadine is on Darug land and Sam is on Gundungurra land. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions and cultures of our First Nations people. We must always remember that the land below our feet is, was and always will be Aboriginal land. Today we are chatting to Khadine Aaron. Khadine has a combined experience of 33 years in the helping and community services profession. With her knowledge of natural therapies and social work, she brings a holistic, strengths-based approach to her work with clients and providing EFT tapping training. In her client work, Khadine specialises in supporting people living with the impacts of trauma, phobias, and other life challenges. She has been providing EFT Tapping Practitioner Training for 5 years all around Australia. Khadine is dedicated to giving back and last year provided 14 full scholarship places for her EFT Certification training. Today's episode is all about emotional freedom techniques, or EFT tapping. We hope you enjoyed joining us inside the therapy room. Welcome, Khadine. How are you going?
I'm fantastic. How about yourself, Samantha?
I'm good. Oh, please call me Sam. Whereabouts are you based?
I'm in Sydney in Parramatta. And I'm on Darug land here in Parramatta. That's controversial according to the Land Council. They don't seem to think Darug Nation exists. That's another discussion, isn't it?
Yeah. Good old politics councils. Oh boy. Is it warm already in Parramatta? Western Sydney is known for being fairly warm.
We've had a very early summer. We've been having summer weather, which I personally love. We haven't had a proper summer. I just hope it lasts for summer because we haven't had fun for a few years now, really, that we can enjoy. Swimming in the lake, so I'm loving it.
Yeah, I feel like winters generally are getting to be not quite as cold as they typically are.
Yeah, I agree, but I also think that summers in general have been cooler than we were used to. I remember growing up and walking home from school and just being like, it was so hot. And you could do a picnic a month ahead and be pretty sure it was going to be sunny. So I think our summers are actually cooler. Our winters warmer is how I experience it anyway, because I'm so warm focused. Like a water dragon. I come out when it's warm.
Yes. Oh, the weather is a weird phenomenon at the moment. It's yes. I mean, we're sort of going off track, but weather impacts mood and things like that. But
it's part of working ecologically with clients is being aware of these challenges.
Yeah, we have gone off track anyway. Let's come back to what we are actually going to chat about, which is I have asked you to chat about your niche, which is EFT tapping, correct?
Yes, EFT tapping, emotional freedom techniques.
Yep, amazing. So there are probably a bunch of people out there who have absolutely no idea what that stands for, what it is. Tell us a little bit about what it is.
Fantastic. So EFT is more commonly known as tapping these days, but there's a variety of therapies that use tapping. So that can be a bit confusing for people too. But essentially it stands for emotional freedom techniques. So it's a range of techniques where a lot of people think it must be just one technique because they just they don't forget the S on the end. But EFT is actually a range of techniques, and EFT is an evidence-based mind-body stress reduction technique. Essentially, there's been a lot of research done into how effective EFT is for trauma, anxiety, pain, phobias, limiting beliefs, health conditions. There was even a study recently on is it helpful for reducing blood sugar levels.
Oh, wow.
We can use it because it's a mind-body technique. It has an effect on the mind and the body at the same time.
Yep.
The medical model likes to separate those, but the strength of EFT is that works on the mind and the body at the same time. You might be working on an emotional challenge, yet you can have a physical benefit, and vice versa. You might be working on a physical pain, but have an emotional benefit. Mm-hmm. Would you like me to give you an example of that?
I would love you to, yeah.
Okay, great. So I was working with a client who lives with Parkinson's. Not something we generally relate to trauma, even now. And we didn't work on the Parkinson's. We just worked on an event that she feels triggered Parkinson's for her. And before we worked on that really significant event, she used to shake pretty much her whole waking time and used to wake up 9 times a night to go to the toilet. Would have anxiety attacks every day thinking about that event because it was replaying for her all the time, probably for 5 years, I think it was now. We worked on that event once for an hour and a half. And when I checked in with her a couple of weeks later, she couldn't remember what we worked on.
Wow.
So it's not replaying anymore. And I said, great, that's fantastic. What's changed? Well, I'm hardly shaking anymore, and only if something upsets me, and only for half an hour. Fantastic. Anything else change? Oh, well, I'm not getting up at night anymore. I'm sleeping through the whole night. So the first time in all those years, getting a proper sleep and restoration. Fantastic. What else has changed? I can take a joke now without getting offended, and I can joke back. So that one event had an emotional impact and a major physiological impact. And that's what makes EFT so exciting compared to talking, because talking, you can talk till the cows come home, but it's not going to release trauma. We know from all the research now that we hold trauma in our bodies. So if we're not accessing where the trauma is our body and helping to release that, then we're not actually helping someone with the trauma. If we're just talking about it, we're just rewiring that trauma. I kind of like to see it with EFT. I relate it to imagine this glass is full of dirty water, and the dirty water represents all of our painful emotions or trauma. If it's full, there's no room for happy, calm, joy, or even thinking clearly, because when our brain is full of the stress hormone cortisol, it makes our brains foggy. It reduces grey matter over an extended period of time, increases anxiety and depression. And so when we in EFT, we focus on what people see as a negative because we want to empty it. So then their glass now has room to naturally be happier, calmer, think more clearly, and get new insights from within them because we've emptied the dirty water. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there is a real need, and it is happening much more now in terms of there is that need to move all therapeutic approaches in my opinion to a much more mind-body approach, to work somatically, to understand the physical sensations, the physiology around that connection to emotion. And I think that a modality that is not taking that into account, that is just working with the mind or just working with the emotion or even just working with the body, is not going to work in a holistic sense. You're not going to get the depth of growth and the depth of healing that you are going to get by being able to integrate all those aspects of our human experience. So
yeah, I absolutely agree. And the benefit of EFT is it allows a fight or flight system to release its triggers to trauma. So that once you work on a specific trauma very thoroughly, that trauma is not going to be an issue for that person anymore. Even if they have to share the story for some reason down the track, they're not going to be triggered by sharing that story. So often people feel like they have to keep telling the story, and it just becomes more traumatic for them in having to retell it. The beauty of EFT is we resolve the trauma from the story, so then they can tell it and it can actually become an empowering experience because there's no longer the triggers in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of it harps back to that desensitization of releasing and being able to hold something without it causing immense pain or immense grief or things like that. What drew you to EFT? How did you come to find it?
Oh, that's a bit of a story. So when I was 25, I was actually a massage practitioner then. I provided massage training. But one day I was in the middle of doing a massage treatment. I think it was a neck massage, and I had a major anxiety attack. And within a month, I couldn't work anymore. If I did the dishes, I wouldn't be able to do anything else for the rest of the day. I had an emotional and physical collapse, and I couldn't work anymore. I pretty much lost everything at that time. And I thought, well, I can't go from a 50-hour week to nothing and stay sane. So I enrolled for community services, welfare at TAFE. Took me twice as long. I'd fall asleep in class, but I still got distinctions at the end of it. And I thought, well, what's next? And some ridiculous person told me that uni was easier than TAFE. I don't know what they were thinking. And I knew I could get a year off at Sydney Uni. So I thought, oh, I'll give that a go. And I went from distinctions, which was the highest at TAFE and about now, to failing. Yeah. And I knew something was wrong with my brain because it would take 10 attempts to read a single sentence to make any sense of it. And my doctor didn't know what was going on. And, it was very hard to get MRIs in those days. But once I came upon this study online, that was an MRI study comparing the brains of people with a healthy brain or healthy people to the brains of people living with fibromyalgia, which was one of my things on my diagnoses. And what they discovered is that with fibromyalgia, have a reduction of grey matter between 8 to 12% on average. And they theorized that that was because of high cortisol levels due to ongoing trauma. That's what they theorized. And that was a couple of decades ago now.
Yeah.
That they knew this, although some people like to deny this. And so it made me really curious about cortisol, because nobody was talking about cortisol 10 years ago. Now everyone in our industry talks about cortisol, but 10 years ago, none of my lecturers knew about it at uni. So I went on a mission to lower my cortisol, and I found different strategies, and I ended up graduating from uni with first class honours after all that torture. Still took me twice as long, but I got there. And another day I was online searching, and I popped this thing called EFT. I'm like, what's that? I just knew I had to attend a training. And so I did. And by this time I'd been in years of counselling since my total collapse. And I remember at the training, because they're very practical, just like the training I offer now. And I worked on an event I thought I'd totally done in all those years of counselling. I had no emotions thinking about it until we started tapping.
Yeah.
And all these emotions came up. I felt like vomiting. The trainer had to get a bin in case I was going to vomit. Like I was that close to vomiting. I thought, wow, thought I'd done that one. And then the next day I was sitting in the sunlight, and it just felt like all the cells in my body were starting to wake up. And it was the most amazing experience. I thought, wow, if this can do this for me, how can I use it with my clients as well as for me?
Yeah,
absolutely. It changed my life. I mean, I had very severe complex PTSD, and it had that for years, as well as chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, and it changed my life, EFT. And that's got me into being so passionate about it and eventually providing training in it.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that is coming through as I'm having these conversations is that people have found their niche. It's been so organic, and it's just happened so naturally that people have fallen into that space, and there is always an element of lived experience, always. Yeah. And I think that it's that beautiful combination of, lived experience is needed, knowledge and theory is needed. The minute we can put those two things together, we've got a game-changing combo. So yeah, I love that.
Absolutely. Clients pick up on that. And I know for many people look me up and online, they read my website, they get to see a little bit of my story. And so a lot of people come because of my story.
Yeah.
Because they read it and like, oh, that person will be able to relate what I've gone through.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to her. And so it makes a difference when you have a lived experience and you share bits of that experience when it's appropriate. It actually helps to build connection with clients or students, whichever you're working with at the time.
Absolutely. One of the biggest things that when I was looking for my therapist, which is a pretty niche area, I specialize in religious trauma. And so I was wanting someone who also specialized in that, which is a pretty niche area. I
Yeah,
remember
love that.
thinking, I don't want to have to educate my therapist. I don't want my clients to have to educate me on things. And so I think that's what tends to be removed when there is that lived experience, when you know that the person you're sitting with has been through whatever it is, and I'm not going to have to educate them. I'm not going to have to try and, convince them that this is a real thing, or that sort of thing. So I think it's
such a difference.
yeah, absolutely it does. Yeah.
And that topic is, diverse in itself. Like my dad, I only just met him for the first time a few months ago, but he used to get paid to do black magic, and he was a monk for a few decades and did spiritual warfare as part of being a monk.
Yeah.
Like, people don't understand that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it can be really hard to find the right person when you've had experiences which are a bit out of the norm.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about EFT, who is this going to benefit? Who might seek out this type of therapy?
Oh, look, it can benefit everybody, to be honest.
Yep.
If we all learn to do just basic tapping on ourselves, or just tapping, even squeezing your fingers for 2 minutes is enough to reduce your cortisol and reduce your anxiety. So reducing the stress hormones, then you're not getting excess flooding your system, which has an impact on your health, not just your mental health and well-being, but your physical well-being too. If we have too high cortisol, it can lead to a variety of health conditions like weight gain, autoimmune conditions, Cushing's syndrome, a whole variety of things. And also, what most people don't realize, it reduces your immune system markers. And so for everybody, it's a benefit. Even children can learn to do the basics of themselves. For us as practitioners, when we're working with clients, we can certainly help our clients with anxiety, trauma, PTSD, complex PTSD, phobias, cravings, pain, limiting beliefs. It's so flexible. And it doesn't matter what age. You can even use it if someone's unconscious, because you can tap on them. And children can learn the basics. We can use it on ourselves. The benefit of EFT as a practitioner is our clients don't need to share their stories, which is good for them, because we're focusing on emotions and body sensations rather than the story. The stories are relevant, really, which is a bit of a brain switch for practitioners usually. And it's good for us. We're not hearing so many traumatic stories, and we're tapping on ourselves, so we're reducing our own cortisol levels. Then we can also use it in group work. So it's so flexible. Really, it's suitable for everyone. I mean, some of my students use it with their clients that are unable to talk, for example, and they just do finger squeezing, and they find that their clients are more regulated and they don't get so frustrated. And so it's such a flexible tool.
Yeah, I did sort of instantly go to the fact that it would be really helpful for that group of people in terms of those who are nonverbal, whether it be because of trauma or whether they're neurodivergent or there is a disability or something. But, to have a modality that lends to somebody who is nonverbal would be incredible. A lot of modalities, it require speech and require talking. There are few and far between that don't fall into that category. So
that's right. And even sometimes people don't want to talk about what's going on or what's happened, and that's really scary. So with EFT, we could start off with drawing and tapping. So drawing, thinking about what's happened, and then tapping on that without any words. It's flexible. We can use it in so many ways to meet our client where they're at, which is always the key.
What might be something that we don't know about EFT coming from somebody who does this? I know that you train other practitioners who do this. What's something that we might not know?
Oh, we've covered a few of them already, but I think a lot of practitioners in particular will look at EFT online. They might watch the Tapping Summit or something like that.
Yeah.
And in the tapping summit or online, they only use a select amount of points.
Mm-hmm.
When I provide EFT training, we cover more points. It's much more thorough, including the hand points. The hand points aren't included in research, but we can do the hand points anywhere. We can do it under the table if we're having a stressful meeting. And sometimes people watch it online and think it's a bit fairy floss and it's easy, and they just go away and they use it with their clients without doing any training at all. But the issue with that is once you start tapping, a lot of big emotions can come up or memories can come up. And as a practitioner, you need to be able to manage that really well within an EFT context. For a lot of practitioners, if big emotions came up, they would stop tapping.
Yeah.
Start talking, but that is not the time to do that. That is the time to keep tapping. So there's a big disservice happening when practitioners think, oh yeah, I can do that with my clients, when they haven't actually attended a training. And that's what I really want people to know, that if you're going to use it with clients, client self-care, clients care, and our duty of care is number one. And don't do it unless you've attended a training and you know what to do when those emotions come up. I think that's so, so important. The other thing I'd love people to know is that in all the research, there's been no adverse effects shown for EFT. So it's quite a safe modality. The only time that it's not is when practitioners aren't meeting clients where they're at and they're pushing, or they're not working from a surface level and then working down into trauma. If they're just going from one big trauma to another and another, of course, that's not good practice in any modality. And so, but as a technique in itself, it's very safe, it's very gentle, and it allows all the changes come from within the client. So as practitioners, we don't need to make the changes happen. We just need to focus on emptying the dirty water. We empty the dirty water, the brain starts to reduce the cortisol and it gets its own insights and starts to think differently. So we don't need to make those cognitive shifts happen, because they happen in the background, which is really exciting. And I think that's more empowering because it's the client.
Yeah, empowering was the word that came to my mind, in the sense of that, that client autonomy, that strengths-based point of view that we often want to instill in our clients, to be able to make those shifts, make those changes, have those revelations and releases, but for that to be done in an empowering way and not in a disempowering.
That's where EFT excels.
Yeah.
We're using the client's exact words. We're not reframing at all. We need to use their exact words for it to land. When insights come up, we don't make them happen, but we can use our knowledge to support the client to make more meaning and sense of those things when they come up.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting. When you see I just get excited all the time.
Yeah.
With the results I see all the time.
I love the move that's happening in regards to different modalities and approaches, that is moving out of the medical model of wanting to fix somebody and moving out of that into a stance of understanding and knowledge and awareness that, we are not a toy that needs fixing. We are a human, and I think being able to move from that medical model of brokenness and fixing and diagnostic into one that is about understanding and compassion and awareness, I think is always going to lend to a more holistic type of healing, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally there.
So I guess if we think about, the podcast is called Inside the Therapy Room. What is somebody going, if they walk into your room, do you work physically, virtually, both?
These days I just work online because it's easy.
Amazing. It's so convenient, isn't it?
Even my training is all online.
Yeah.
Most now. I still have some in-person training, but most of it's online now. And it's great because people develop skills for working online.
Yeah, absolutely. So if somebody lands themselves in your virtual therapy room, what are they going to expect? Is there something unique that happens? We use the word a lot at the moment, which is tapping, but what does that actually look like for somebody who has absolutely no idea about this or who is not in the therapy world?
Oh, great question. So generally a first session will be very educational about what is EFT. I'll be explaining what EFT is, and the answer to that will depend on who I'm talking to and whether they're a therapist or not a therapist, for example. And I'll be teaching them the basics that they can use themselves to do at home in relation to what they've come to work on. So we'll be very first surface level. By the time they leave the first session, they'll be able to do some basics at home in between our sessions to start reducing their own anxiety or anger or whatever's happening for them. So from that first session, they're going away with something to use for life.
Yep.
And each session I set it up and I let the clients know, today we're going to do this particular technique, and this is what this technique looks like. And so every session is set up for the client. Every technique is explained to the client before we do it. I also let clients know that they don't need to share their stories when they're with me, because clients are used to having to share their stories. And so I make it really clear from the first session, with me, it's going to be a little bit different because we're going to use your exact words and you don't have to share stories with me. We're just going to focus on your emotions and your physical sensations. We'll use a variety of techniques, but in EFT, there's only one technique where we ask a client to share the story, but we would have done a lot of work to prepare for that. And it's not like tapping and talking. It's very systematic, because anytime there's an emotional spike, we would be pausing at that moment and seeing if there's anything happening physically or emotionally. We would tap on that until the level of discomfort is gone or very low at that point of the story. And so it's very different to just talking about it. In that instance, we're removing the trauma from each little part of that story, but we would never do that on a first session.
Yeah. So when we sort of use the term tapping, what does that entail?
Yes. So with EFT, it's a bit different because, yes, we talk, but we're also going to tap on specific meridian points. Once upon a time, people thought that was just woo-woo and but it's actually not, because now with all the current microscopes, they've identified the meridians and they call it the primovascular system. Runs are like our veins and arteries, and they can see it now with our modern technology. And so we tap on specific points in our meridians and allows that stress or trigger to relax. That's why it sends it allows the fight or flight system to know that it's safe while thinking about that thing that's been upsetting. And so it's really quite simple. People can learn to do the very basics, but then as practitioner, we have more advanced techniques. Typically, when we do EFT, we do what's called a setup statement, and that has two parts to it. The first part is acknowledging, or I like to say honoring the problem, because often we don't, what we're going to work on. And the second part is a self-affirmation. So effectively it says, even though this shitty thing happened to me and that makes me really upset, I still like myself as a person. So it's not affirming what's happened to us, but it's affirming that I'm not that. I'm separate to that. And I actually like who I am, or that I'm even just doing the best that I can. And then after we do a setup statement, we'd be tapping through the different points to empty that dirty water using reminder words and phrases that our clients have used while tapping on the specific points in our head, our chests, our underarms, and fingers. I use fingers. Not everyone does, but I do.
I wonder if practitioners tend to have a struggle with it because it does rely less on the practitioner almost. And I think that, could make some people feel a little uncomfy.
Yes, for practitioners, there's a few areas where they need to do a brain switch. One is we need all the details of a story.
Yeah.
And people are used to pulling it apart, making meaning. Well, we don't need to do that. And it's actually none of our business.
Mm.
You need to release the trauma from the story.
Yeah.
So that's a huge brain switch for a lot of practitioners. And I say to them, is the curiosity about the client or is it about you? We're programmed as practitioners to be curious, which is not a bad thing. But if that curiosity actually starts to reaffirm that wiring in the brain around that trauma, it's not helpful. What's helpful is allowing the whole system to release the trauma from the body.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so what are we focusing on? It's also a shift to use the client's words rather than reframing.
Yeah.
That's really hard for practitioners. It's also hard to focus on what people think is the negative, which is what's going on for the client, and not rushing to the positives.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's so much now about, we've got to think positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've got to create that learning. Yeah, we can create the learning, but we need to empty the dirty water first.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can say all the positive affirmations you like, but it's not going to make a difference. For example, if you're working with a client and they don't love themselves, how many times would they need to look in the mirror and say, I love myself, before they actually do?
Yeah.
How many times? But with EFT, we can work on all the reasons why they don't and actually get results.
Yeah.
There's a lot of brain switches for practitioners when they're learning EFT. And sometimes it's simpler, easier for people who aren't practitioners to come for that reason, because they don't have to do that brain switch. But the beauty is, once they get used to that, then practitioners find that they can combine EFT with their other skills very easily.
I would imagine that it could almost be used adjacent to other modalities as a self-soothing approach and things like that in other trauma modalities or sort of, mind-body approaches, that it could be used adjacent if somebody is wanting to talk and needing, we know that there is a real part of healing from trauma in owning and being able to verbalize and tell your story. But I would imagine that the tapping could be used adjacent to that as well as a standalone, as a sort of
we need to be able to create space for the client who might not have shared what's happened, and it's really empowering for them to be able to share.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then we can use EFT as part of that. We can even do some tapping on ourselves while the client is talking. They can do tapping and talking, so that they're starting to reduce the cortisol already around that thing. And so it melds together. But with a whole variety of therapeutic tools, you can combine tapping and make them more effective together. It's highly possible that way.
Yeah. I love things that don't need to be standalone. I love things that can be integrated, because I think that that's when a client gets the best in their therapeutic journey, is when they have a practitioner who integrates different things so that it's the best path, the best experience, and the most beneficial for them, not a cookie cutter sort of approach. I love an integrated approach.
Yes, and the beauty is EFT we could do just for 5 minutes if strong emotions come up during a session, and we can use it for a whole session. We can also use it in group work. So for those of us who provide groups as part of therapeutic groups, we can use it within a group setting as well, really effectively. In fact, some of the research shows that when we use EFT in a group, we get an even bigger reduction in cortisol.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking, I love group work. I think group work in general can be incredibly powerful. And I think that there is just that shared experience, particularly if you are in a group with other people who have gone through similar experiences to you, that collective experience is powerful. So I was thinking, I could imagine it would be sort of exponentially.
When groups tap together, they connect together. If you look at the research, say for children in classrooms, to draw upon that, if someone is a bit disruptive, instead of getting into trouble, the whole class taps. And so the whole class have a reduction in their stress levels. Because the cortisol comes down, they're able to learn more. And so their marks improve and how they do at school improves. But also interesting, bullying goes down because they're not taking their frustrations out on each other.
Yeah.
And if you're, depending on how it's facilitated, they bounce off each other. And so they're connecting with each other.
Sense of camaraderie would come adjacent to that. Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. And that's where when practitioners, whether they're mental health or wellbeing practitioners, come to the training, many of them have attended training online before and thought, oh, I never get connection online. But that's where it's very different when you're EFT, because everybody's off mute instead of on mute.
Yeah.
Engaging is if you're in a room together, and because you're tapping together either as a group or in pairs, people become very connected even online. And
Yeah.
not many tools allow for that.
Amazing. I love group work. I just think it can be really powerful in general. So I love that. We are about to come to my favorite part of every episode, which is when I want to find out what myth people want to smash about their modality, because I am all about breaking the rules and smashing some stuff. So what are we smashing about EFT?
Well, a lot of people still think that EFT is somehow woo-woo.
Yeah.
Because of the tapping part. And when people talk about meridians, I think about energy. People forget, though, that we are energetic beings. Every cell in our body is electricity, is energy. We are made up of that. Desks and us, we only feel hard because we vibrate at a certain frequency. But somehow people don't connect that with science. But that is solid science, is that we are energy. So some people think it's woo-woo because of the tapping part. Yet if we look at the research, if we do the words without the tapping, there's no reduction in cortisol. If we do the tapping on the points with 0 words, there's still a reduction in cortisol. So the tapping part is actually the vital part. And there's been hundreds of papers written on EFT now showing the benefits of EFT and how effective it is. So it's absolutely evidence-based. And it's not woo-woo. Just because someone doesn't understand it, then it's not to decide that it's woo-woo. People only need to look at the research. I remember once speaking to, he was a researcher that focused on ears and hearing, and he basically said, oh, that's rubbish. And he said, oh, I'm really skeptical of some things. And I said, well, if you're a true skeptic, you need to be skeptical of your own skepticism.
Absolutely.
Because are you looking at all the information available to you before you make that decision, or are you just making an emotional decision based on your own programming? And he went away, to his credit, went and looked at the research and came back and apologized.
Yeah.
But generally when people say it's woo-woo, they haven't looked at the actual research.
Yeah. I tend to find that if somebody is resistant immediately to something for whatever reason, I find that it tends to either come from a lack of effort, I guess, just a lack of effort in even understanding it, or just complete ignorance and arrogance and thinking that your way is the right way. Whereas I find that if somebody says to me, oh, I'm skeptical, I've had clients say to me, I'm skeptical about therapy, and I go, great, because that means that you're open to seeing different perspectives. It means you're not, skepticism is much better than resistance. Skepticism is openness. It's trying to see things from different perspectives, different points of view, to sort of understand it. And so skepticism is not the enemy.
It's very different to just having a closed mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Skepticism is not narrow-mindedness. I think they're two different things.
They are often confused.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's really interesting because, things like massage and that sort of thing, which are all based around touch, it's very well researched. There is whole industries around it, in that massage is incredibly therapeutic. So I find it interesting that we would think anything other than the fact that, of course, any form of touch, particularly repetitive touch, is going to have an impact on your emotional, your mental state as well. So
I think there's also the other issue of certain modalities being seen as the gold standard.
Oh, yes.
And either practitioners or the industry or people higher up holding on to that rather than keeping up with the current research that demonstrates that not just EFT, but a whole variety of other modalities are actually better than what they're saying is the gold standard.
Yeah.
And they really do a disservice by not allowing public free access to these other modalities like EFT that have far more effective results. So there was one study that compared EFT to CBT for post-traumatic stress disorder. EFT got the results in 2 months. That CBT took 6 months in a 12-month review period. The group at CBT had gone backwards. The group who received EFT had stayed the same or had even improved.
I mean, you are preaching to the choir with me in regards to CBT. It certainly has its place. Don't get me wrong. There are certain things and certain people that can benefit from CBT. I certainly don't ascribe to the notion that CBT does absolutely anything for trauma. But, I think there is that need to broaden the scope. I don't think in the therapy world there should be a gold standard of anything, because everybody is different, everybody is unique. Every person could, not everybody who goes to war comes out with the exact same, responses, the exact same experiences. Not everybody who goes to war comes back with PTSD, and so we know that the same experience doesn't equal the same outcome. And so, we should never, I don't think, when we are dealing with humans and a holistic mind, body, spirit, soul behavior approach, there should be ever a gold standard, because I think that ascribes to that cookie cutter notion that one size fits all. And I think we know that that's rubbish most of the time.
Totally rubbish. And that's why it's important for us to have a variety of tools. Even me, I don't specialize in EFT, but I have a variety of tools in my toolkit to use with people.
Absolutely. I think that that's needed. I love getting away from a one size fits all approach. I think that's crap, to be honest.
I think it's too. I think it's crap.
Yeah.
It's very surface level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're sort of using that approach, then the people that you are with, and if you feel like your therapist is using that approach, then you probably know all too well that it's probably not working, is at the base of that. It has been wonderful chatting. It's been great. I love this. I love hearing about things that are not mainstream, because I think the more we can involve what would be considered alternative approaches, I think the more we get to the heart of dealing with a human as a whole, and not as their brain or their heart or just their body. And I think the more that we can do that, the more the people that we work with are going to get the benefit, and the more we get the benefit when we seek out those as well.
And the less vicarious trauma that we develop in general practice when we use mind-body techniques ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am all for that. I am all for less vicarious trauma.
I'll actually be speaking at the Australian Counselling Association conference this weekend about using EFT for practitioner resilience and workplace connection.
Yeah, I love that. I think the burnout and compassion fatigue that it would reduce, even just that alone would make a world of difference to people. And that's not therapy specific, compassion fatigue happens in any helping profession, nurses, doctors, all sorts of things. So, the more we can reduce the impact of anybody in a helping profession, I think the better outcomes we get, and the better we feel about pouring so much of ourselves into other people. So
I agree. There's been a few studies actually done with nurses and their trauma around EFT, which is really exciting. I'd love to see that for counsellors and social
Absolutely.
psychologists. I'd love to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It has been great. I hope I will pop all the links and stuff in the description for people to find you, to find more about EFT. And, you know, if there are practitioners out there who want to train in it, it is sitting in my training tab I have a million tabs open in my computer browser, and a good half of them are all of the trainings that I want to do, and yours is sitting in there. I hope more people are drawn to things that are off the beaten path, so to speak. That's what I hope.
The exciting stuff is.
Yeah.
So the cutting edge stuff is.
Yeah.
And I think we're very focused on what's evidence-based, but every modality has to start from somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and, you know, we read gold standard books like The Body Keeps the Score and things like that by Bessel van der Kolk, and we know that, you know, everything starts somewhere. Once upon a time, there was no language for PTSD. And so everything has got to start somewhere. And if we don't research it, we don't understand it, we don't learn about it, then it can't become something that is evidence-based, like, you know, the big modalities that we hear about. So yeah, everything.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thank you. It's been great. I hope even just one person, I mean, the goal of these podcasts, the heart of what I wanted is for people to land in the physical or the virtual rooms of the people who are going to be able to best support them. And so I hope that happens in regards to things like this that are not always widely talked about. So that's my hope.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been wonderful. We hope you enjoyed joining us inside the therapy room. Thanks for listening.